I never thought I'd cry over a garage. But when I saw what they'd done, my tools sold, my boxes ransacked, the shelves I built with my father torn from the walls like they meant nothing, I sat down on the cold concrete and wept. Not because of the mess, but because of what it meant. Because my son had decided, without even asking, that I no longer needed my house, that I no longer needed my life. He was wrong. If you stick with me until the end of the story, you'll understand why I didn't just fight back. I made sure they'd never underestimate me again. The call came on a Thursday morning. It was 6:47 a.m., and I was halfway through scrambling eggs when the phone rang. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Nobody good calls that early. But something made me answer. "Mom," Lucas said, his voice sharp with urgency. "You need to sit down." I didn't sit down. I kept scrambling the eggs. He hesitated, then barreled on. "Alexis and I have decided it's time. We're moving into the house. We've already started clearing space in the garage." My hand froze mid-stir. "Your house," I said slowly. "Our house, technically," he replied. "I mean, it's paid off. It's an asset. You're living alone, and we need more space with the baby coming. It just makes sense." He said it like it was logical, practical. Like I should be grateful for the opportunity to hand over the home I'd built my entire life inside. I kept my voice calm. "Lucas, where do you expect me to go?" There was a beat of silence. I could hear Alexis in the background, murmuring something. "We found a lovely place just outside town. It's a retirement condo complex. All inclusive. Pool, activities, a shuttle. You won't have to worry about anything." Worry. That word echoed. I'd worried my entire life. About Lucas. About making ends meet after his father passed. About whether I'd be enough for him without a second parent in the picture. And now he thought I'd be happy to be boxed up and relocated like I was a problem being solved. I hung up the phone without another word. I drove straight home from the grocery store to find the garage door wide open. Lucas's SUV was in the driveway. Two strangers were hauling out furniture I hadn't agreed to sell. "Hey," I shouted. "What are you doing?" They looked confused. One pointed at Lucas, who emerged from the side gate looking far too casual for someone caught mid-invasion. "Mom," he said, hands raised. "Relax. We're just getting started on the conversion." "Conversion?" "The garage," he said. "We're going to turn it into a nursery and office. It's just the beginning. We're going to renovate the kitchen too. Alexis wants an island." An island. They were redecorating my life. I looked around in disbelief. My father's old workbench was gone. The cabinets I stained by hand were dismantled. A stack of my personal files lay spilled on the driveway. I couldn't breathe. "Lucas, I didn't agree to this." He frowned. "We talked about this." "No," I snapped. "You told me. This morning. After you already started." His jaw tightened. "Well, we didn't think you'd take it well. But you'll see. It's for the best." I turned and walked inside. Inside. My house. Where I had raised him. Fed him. Waited up nights when he missed curfew. Celebrated birthdays. Grieved losses. And now I was a guest. A tenant who didn't pay rent. A burden to be managed. I found Alexis in the kitchen, barefoot and flipping through a catalog, already discussing backsplash options with someone on speakerphone. "Oh," she said, spotting me.
"Hi, Marion."
"I hope you're okay with neutral tones. We want something universally appealing in case we sell." In case we sell. My knees buckled. I didn't faint, but I did sit, right there on the tile floor. I must have looked ridiculous, a grown woman in her 60s slumped against a fridge, eyes wide, mouth tight with rage. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not then. I just listened as Alexis continued her call, her voice cheerful, efficient, erasing me from the home I built like I was never even part of the foundation. And that was when I knew. I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. Not my house. Not my history. Not my dignity. They thought I was too quiet to fight back. They forgot who taught them how to stand. They were about to remember. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, And don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. I spent the rest of that day in silence. Not because I didn't have words. I had too many. They swarmed in my throat, stinging like bees, and if I opened my mouth, they would come spilling out in a scream. So I said nothing. I waited. I watched. Lucas and Alexis moved through my house like it was already theirs. I heard them discussing paint samples and knocking on walls to test the insulation. They ordered takeout like they lived there, pad thai for her, chicken sauté for him, and left their empty containers on my kitchen island, the one I'd saved for years to install after a decade of linoleum and laminate. Around sunset, I slipped out the back door and walked 3 blocks to my neighbor Carol's place. She answered in a robe and curlers, the scent of lavender lotion wafting out like an old familiar comfort. "Oh, honey," she said as soon as she saw my face. "Come in. I just made tea." I sat at her table, fingers curled around a steaming mug, and told her everything. Not just about that morning, but about the last few months, the strange way Lucas had started dropping by more, offering to help with things, nudging me to consider downsizing. "How do you think they got access to the house without your permission?" Carol asked, her brow furrowed. "They've had a key for years," I said quietly. "Emergency use only. Or so I thought." Carol leaned forward. "You need a lawyer." I blinked. "A lawyer?" She nodded. "Sweetheart, you own that house outright. If they're trying to take it from you, you need someone in your corner. Someone who understands the law." I stared into my tea, heart pounding. "But he's my son." "Honey," she said gently, "sometimes the people closest to us count on that very thing to get away with what they're doing." I walked home slowly. My house glowed from the inside like it belonged to someone else. Lucas's favorite jazz playlist played through the speakers. Alexis's laughter rang out from the living room. I climbed the front steps like a stranger. They didn't even notice I'd left. That night, in the quiet of my bedroom, I opened the drawer where I kept my old file folders. Deeds. Titles. The last will and testament I'd updated 5 years ago after my cancer scare. I flipped through it all, running my fingers along the embossed notary stamps. My name. My house. Lucas had no legal right to it. No power of attorney. No joint ownership. But that wouldn't stop him if I didn't act now. In the morning, I called a lawyer. Robert Glenn. Local. Sharp. Came highly recommended by Carol's bridge partner, whose son had once sued a shady home contractor and won. He listened quietly as I told him the story. When I finished, he let out a long whistle. "Well," he said, "this isn't the first time I've seen something like this. Adult children treating elderly parents like chess pieces. But you're not powerless, Mrs. Hartley." I almost cried when he said that. No one had called me by my full name in years. Not Mom. Not Marion. Just Mrs. Hartley. Like I was still a person who mattered. "What are my options?" I asked. "Well, for starters," he said, "we're going to lock down everything. You'll revoke any informal permissions. Draft a cease and desist for the unauthorized removal of property. And you'll get an updated estate plan, one that leaves no room for ambiguity." "But I already have a will." He leaned forward. "Then it's time to change it." That hit harder than I expected. Changing a will felt like changing a truth. Like rewriting the story of who I'd loved most in this world. But love doesn't mean letting yourself be stolen from. By the end of the meeting, I had a checklist of actions, appointments, and a promise. "They're not going to get away with this, Mrs. Hartley. Not on my watch." I walked out of that office standing taller than I had in months. Lucas wasn't home when I returned. Alexis was lounging in my recliner, scrolling her phone, one leg draped casually over the side. She barely looked up. "Hey. The contractor's coming tomorrow at 10. We're thinking about knocking down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room to open the space." "You're not doing anything," I said flatly. She looked up. "Excuse me? This is my house. You don't make decisions here." She smirked. "You said we could move in." "No," I said. "I didn't. And as of now, your key doesn't work anymore." Her smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "I've changed the locks," I said, "and revoked any access you or Lucas thought you had. You'll find your things boxed up in the garage. I expect them gone by the weekend." Her jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." I stepped closer, close enough to see the panic starting to creep into her eyes. "I've never been more serious." She stood, incredulous. "Lucas is going to flip. I'm counting on it." And I was. Because this was the moment I'd been waiting for. The reckoning. When Lucas returned that evening, storming in with his mouth already open to protest, he found me sitting calmly at the dining table with a folder full of paperwork and a list of everything I'd changed. New locks, security cameras, updated will, legal filings. He shouted. He pleaded. He paced like a caged animal. But I didn't rise. I didn't argue. I simply slid the folder across the table and said, "You wanted control, Lucas. You wanted to take what wasn't yours. Now you've taken something else instead." He looked at the will, at the crossed-out name where he used to be. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Consequences," I said. Lucas didn't speak at first. He just stared at the will, his name slashed out with bold, deliberate lines. The replacement name typed beneath his in crisp black font, the Hartley Foundation. A new nonprofit I had registered 2 days ago. A name I chose on purpose. Legacy meant nothing if it died with me. He blinked hard, then looked up. "What is this?" he asked again, voice taut. I stayed still, my hands folded on the table, the air between us heavy and electric. "It's your lesson, Lucas." His hands curled into fists. "You're cutting me out of your will?" "You already cut me out of my life," I replied evenly. Alexis hovered behind him in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly. She looked less smug than usual and more worried. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You can't do this," Lucas said, rising to his feet. "You can't just erase me." "I didn't erase you," I said. "You did that yourself. When you decided I wasn't a person anymore. Just a signature. A bank account. A problem to be solved." He took a step toward me. "You're my mother. And this is my house," I said. "And that," I pointed to the will, "is now my legacy." He scoffed. "A charity?" "Not just any charity," I said. "The Hartley Foundation will provide emergency grants and shelter transitions for elderly women being displaced by their own families. I'll make sure no other woman goes through what I did." Alexis's eyes widened. "You're using the estate for strangers?" I turned my gaze on her slowly. "Strangers? You mean women who've been taken advantage of, manipulated, discarded?" She looked away. Lucas threw up his hands. "This is crazy. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. You'll regret this." I stood. Finally. "No, Lucas. I regret letting it go this long. I regret not seeing how little you respected me. But I don't regret this." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You have 48 hours to collect your belongings from the garage. After that, I'll have them removed. If you attempt to enter this property again without my consent, I will file a restraining order." "You're threatening me?" "I'm protecting myself," I said. "Something you clearly never planned to do." He looked stunned. Alexis reached for his arm, but he pulled away. "You're choosing a charity over your family," he said bitterly. "No," I said. "I'm finally choosing myself." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I didn't either, not fully. But I liked her more already. They left without another word. And when the front door slammed, I didn't cry. I breathed. The next day, the calls started. First from Lucas. I didn't answer. Then Alexis. Blocked. Then my sister Marianne. "Marianne, honey, I heard some kind of drama? Lucas says you've lost your mind." "I found it actually," I said, sipping my tea. "Took me long enough." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "Do you want me to come over?" I blinked. That wasn't what I expected. "You do that?" "Of course. You're not alone in this. I saw what Mom went through with Aunt June when she signed her condo over to that awful nephew. He drained her dry and left her with nothing." I swallowed. I didn't know that. There's a lot we didn't talk about growing up, Marianne said gently. But that stops now. She arrived an hour later with takeout and a thick binder labeled Boundary Rebuilding, Marianne's edition. First order of business, she said, is making sure no one else takes a piece of you without your permission. We sat on the back deck, watching the afternoon sun spill over the hydrangeas, and for the first time in months, I felt something besides grief. I felt surrounded. That weekend, Lucas returned. He didn't knock. Just stood in the driveway like a child outside the principal's office, surrounded by labeled cardboard boxes stacked neatly on a tarp. I stepped outside. He turned slowly. You really did it. Yes. He looked at the boxes like they were full of memories instead of IKEA dishware and extension cords. You're serious about the charity? I've already filed the paperwork, I said. The money from this house, when it sells, will fund the first 3 years. His jaw clenched. Why would you throw it all away? I'm not, I said. I'm investing it in something better. Something that gives back instead of takes. He kicked at the gravel. You could have told me you were unhappy. I did, I said. For years. With my silences. With my exhaustion. With every time I smiled through a disappointment. You just weren't listening. He said nothing. Lucas, I said softly, you still have time to be the man I raised. But you can't do that standing here. Not today. He looked up, eyes red, nostrils flared. Then he nodded, picked up the first box, and left. I never intended for any of this to become public. At least, not beyond the confines of my neighborhood, my church friends, and the local legal office helping me navigate the aftermath. But the internet has a funny way of taking your quiet decisions and turning them into something bigger than you imagined. It started with a single post. My niece, Marianne's daughter Chloe, came over one afternoon to help me scan documents for the Hartley Foundation. She was a quiet girl, fresh out of college with a social work degree and a soft spot for anyone over the age of 60. We sat at the kitchen table with stacks of paperwork, and at one point, she looked up and said, Aunt Marian, would it be okay if I shared some of this? Just a few lines on my Instagram story about what you're doing? People need to hear about this. I hesitated. I don't know, sweetheart. I'm not looking for attention. It's not about attention, she said. It's about example. About showing other people, especially women, that they don't have to put up with this kind of thing. That they can take their power back. I looked at the stack of revised estate papers. The freshly notarized founding document for the Hartley Foundation. The folder of legal notices sent to Lucas and Alexis. And I nodded. Okay, just be respectful. She smiled and got to work. A photo of me, arms crossed in front of the house. A caption that read, My great-aunt Marian was being pushed out of her own home by her son and daughter-in-law. Instead of giving in, she changed the locks, rewrote her will, and started a foundation to help other women in the same situation. This is what strength looks like. I thought nothing of it. Until the next day when my phone started ringing nonstop. The first call was from Carol. You're viral, she said flatly. What does that mean? It means the internet loves you. Check your email. I opened my inbox to find over 70 new messages, most of them from strangers. Women. Men. Couples. Even college students. Thank you for standing up. My mom went through the same thing. I didn't know I could say no to my son. Now I do. Can I donate to the Hartley Foundation? By lunchtime, Chloe called me in a panic. Aunt Marian, it's everywhere. Some women's empowerment pages reposted it, and it hit Twitter. You're being called the patron saint of boundaries. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my tea. Patron saint, huh? Do I get a halo with that? That night, the local news called. A reporter named Shayla Owens, sharp as a tack and blessed with the kind of composure that would make you confess a felony just by looking at her, asked for an interview. We think what you're doing is brave, she said. And a lot of women around here, especially older women, are writing in, saying you gave them hope. You may not want the spotlight, but you're in it now. Might as well use it. I agreed to a small, pre-recorded segment. We sat on my back porch at golden hour, the garden blooming behind me, and I told her the truth.
Note a sub-story.
Not a revenge fantasy, just the simple, painful truth. I spent my whole life giving, I said. And somewhere along the line, my children stopped seeing me as a person. They saw me as a support beam. Sturdy, invisible, expected to hold up everything without complaint. Until they decided the house didn't need that beam anymore. The segment aired 2 nights later. By morning, my phone had 214 missed notifications. The foundation's website crashed from traffic. People were mailing handwritten letters to my P.O. box. Not just from New Jersey or New York, but from Wisconsin, Arizona, even London. And for the first time since Lucas tried to take my house, I felt not just seen, but amplified. Lucas, on the other hand, was furious. He called at 10:17 a.m., voice tight with rage. "Are you kidding me, Mom? You told the whole world I tried to evict you." "I didn't use your name," I replied calmly. "I told my story. My story, Lucas. You humiliated me." I paused. "You did that yourself. I just gave it context. You're making me look like a monster." I inhaled slowly, keeping my tone even. "Lucas, if you don't want to be seen as a monster, stop acting like one." There was a stunned silence. Then, "I'm your son.
Yes.
And I'll always love you. But I will not protect your ego at the cost of my dignity." He hung up. 2 days later, Alexis made her move. She published her own statement on Facebook, dripping with self-righteous indignation. "We tried to offer Marion a peaceful transition to a better lifestyle. We never intended to hurt her. Her version of events is exaggerated and one-sided. She's weaponizing the internet for sympathy, and we're being harassed by strangers because of it. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time." The comment section wasn't kind. One top reply read, "You don't get to sell someone's garage without their permission and call it a peaceful transition." Another simply said, "Weaponizing the internet?" She didn't even know she was going viral. For every weak defense they mounted, the world responded with facts, empathy, and receipts. I didn't reply publicly. I didn't have to. My truth was louder than their spin. The next week, I stood before the town council with my lawyer and Chloe by my side. We filed the paperwork to acquire an old Craftsman duplex slated for demolition. It would become the Hartley Foundation's first transitional residence. The same day, a woman named Denise knocked on my door. She was in her 70s, wore orthopedic shoes, and carried a faded leather purse. Her eyes welled up as she said, "I saw your story on the news, and I just wanted to say thank you. I left my daughter's house last year after she started locking the pantry, so I couldn't overeat. I thought I was crazy. You helped me remember I'm not." I hug her without hesitation. She left behind an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check for $1,000. I wept, not for what was lost, but for what was being built. The letter came in a thick envelope. No return address. No warning. I opened it at my kitchen table on a Monday morning, sunlight streaming in through the windows, my teacup still half full beside me. I unfolded the contents slowly, methodically. The first page bore the letterhead of a downtown law firm. One I recognized. Lucas had interned there during college. His old mentor, Richard Levine, was listed as the attorney of record. Subject: disputed ownership and estate concerns. Hartley residence. I read the first paragraph 3 times. It alleged that Lucas had a verbal agreement with me regarding his inheritance, supported by substantial investment into future renovations. It claimed emotional damages, breach of trust. It even included a request for mediation or, failing that, civil litigation. They were suing me. My own son was taking me to court. The irony was bitter. A month ago, I wouldn't have known what to do. I would have panicked,
Cried.
called him, begging for peace. But not this version of me. This version of me took a deep breath, folded the letter back into its envelope, and reached for my lawyer's card. Robert Glenn's face was unreadable as he flipped through the documents across from me. "Desperation," he said at last. "You think they'll go through with it?
Hard to say.
But the threat alone is meant to rattle you. They want you scared, hesitant. If they can shake your confidence, you might offer them something just to make it go away. He glanced up at me. Are you scared? I thought about it.
Was I?
There was a part of me that still recoiled at conflict, that still saw Lucas as the little boy who used to leave dandelions on my pillow and draw misshapen hearts with him written in crooked letters. But that boy had grown into a man who sold my tools without asking, who weaponized the law to claim something that wasn't his. No, I said. I'm angry, but I'm not scared. Robert smiled faintly. Good. Then let's talk about your countersuit. We filed within the week. Not for money. Not even for damages. But for a declaratory judgment. It was a way of legally establishing the validity of my updated estate plan and reinforcing my sole ownership of the house. In effect, it blocked any claim Lucas or Alexis might try to assert down the road. And it sent a message. I wasn't backing down. I didn't even tell Lucas we were filing. I let him receive the notification from his lawyer, just like I had. The following Sunday, he showed up at my door again. This time in a suit, clean-shaven, hair slicked back. He looked like the boy I remembered from graduation day, not the man who'd tried to erase me from my own home. May I come in? He asked. I opened the screen door, but didn't step aside. I don't think that's a good idea. His jaw tightened. So, we're doing this the hard way? No, I said. We're doing it the legal way. You made that choice when you sent me that letter. He stepped back. You know I didn't want this. No, I said quietly. What you didn't want was accountability. He stared at me for a long moment, then left without another word. The legal proceedings were brutal, not in courtrooms or dramatic depositions, but in small, relentless ways. Paperwork, statements, interrogatories. I learned to navigate them like battle maps. Robert guided me, Chloe scanned everything, and Carol made casseroles and picked up my dry cleaning like a general's aide. I wasn't alone. That made all the difference. Still, Alexis wasn't finished. A week before the first hearing, she sent a letter of her own. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was handwritten. Marion, I hope you can find it in your heart to reconsider what you're doing. This isn't just about money or property, it's about family. You've always said you believed in second chances. Please give us one. Lucas is broken. He needs his mother. He needs you. I know we made mistakes, but we were under pressure. The baby is coming. We're scared. If you reverse the will and agree to a truce, we'll drop everything. No court. No press. Just peace. Sincerely, Alexis. It was manipulative.
Polished.
Exactly the kind of letter someone writes when they know the legal tides are turning. But one line stuck with me. The baby is coming. My grandchild. I'd nearly forgotten in all the noise and fury. There was a tiny life caught in the middle of all this. One who had done nothing wrong. One who had no say in any of it. And I wept for that baby. For the family they were being born into. For the legacy they would inherit. Not the house or the money, but the history. The broken branches of our family tree. The night before the hearing, I lit a candle. Not for prayer. I wasn't particularly religious. But for clarity. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, and asked myself what I wanted, not just to win, not just to prove a point, but after. What would justice look like if it weren't soaked in bitterness? What would legacy look like if it could still be salvaged? And the answer came to me, quiet and clear. I didn't want revenge. I wanted change. For me.
For them.
For the baby. And I would go through whatever I needed to get it. I'd never been in a courtroom for anything more serious than jury duty. But the moment I stepped into that municipal building on a gray Tuesday morning, I knew this wasn't going to be anything like those polite deliberations over parking tickets or neighborly disputes. This was personal. Robert walked beside me, briefcase in hand, his calm confidence grounding me like an anchor. Chloe sat just behind us in the gallery, phone silenced but clutched tightly, like she might need to document every moment if it turned ugly. Across the aisle, Lucas sat stiffly in a tailored navy suit. His lawyer, Richard Levine, whispered something in his ear. Alexis was nowhere to be seen. I wondered if she was home with her swollen belly, waiting for an update, or if she simply couldn't stomach watching the man she nudged into battle try to bury his own mother in paperwork. The judge was a woman named Audrey Singer, stern, meticulous, and not easily impressed. She began by reviewing the scope of the proceedings. This was a civil dispute over inheritance expectations and property rights. There would be no formal trial, only a hearing to determine the legal validity of my revised estate plan and whether any undue influence or breach of agreement had occurred. It sounded boring on paper, but when Judge Singer asked me to take the stand, I realized nothing about this would be boring. This was the moment I would speak my truth, under oath. Robert gave my shoulder a light squeeze before I rose and walked toward the witness box. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down with my back straight and chin high. Mrs. Hartley, the judge began, can you explain, in your own words, why you made the changes to your will and revoked access to your home? I took a breath, looked at Lucas. He didn't look away. I made the changes, I said, because I was no longer willing to be treated as disposable. I heard Penn's pause in the gallery. For most of my adult life, I gave freely and often without question. I raised my children alone after my husband died. I worked double shifts. I went without vacations, new clothes, even basic comforts, because I believed that's what mothers do. I looked down at my hands, at the faint calluses that never really went away. But love doesn't mean being used. It doesn't mean funding renovations I didn't authorize or being told, without discussion, that I would be moving out of my own house to make room for someone else's family. Judge Singer gave a small nod. And your foundation? Why did you create that? I smiled faintly, because I realized this wasn't just my story. There are women all over this country who raised families, gave everything, and were left with nothing. I wanted to turn my pain into something meaningful. Her face softened for just a moment. Then she turned to Lucas's attorney. Mr. Levine? He rose, buttoned his suit jacket, and approached with a thin smile. Mrs. Hartley, isn't it true that you told your son and daughter-in-law they could stay in your home while they prepared for their baby's arrival? I told them they could visit. I never consented to them moving in or altering the property. But didn't you accept groceries, help with repairs, and other support from them over the past 6 months? I accepted kindness, I said. What I didn't accept was occupation. He cocked his head. And yet, you never told them explicitly to leave until after the dispute over the garage. Is that correct? I leaned forward. Mr. Levine, if I invite someone into my home for a meal and they start tearing down the walls, I don't think it takes a formal eviction notice to say they've overstayed their welcome. There were a few stifled laughs behind me. He tried to regroup. Your revised will names a nonprofit, your own foundation, as the sole beneficiary of your estate. Do you not find that unusual? No, I said. What's unusual is the expectation that inheritance is a right, not a privilege.
He blinked.
I earned every brick of that house. I continued. If my son wants a legacy, he can build his own. When I stepped down, Lucas took the stand. He looked nervous, his collar a little too tight, the veneer of certainty cracking at the edges. He spoke about his intentions, how he and Alexis had only wanted to help me, how he thought I'd be happy to transition into a more manageable lifestyle. He used the word manageable twice. I saw Judge Singer's eyebrows rise the second time. Then he made a mistake. He said, I just assumed it was all going to be mine one day. There it was. Entitlement, plain and unvarnished. Judge Singer leaned back. Mr. Hartley, are you aware that estate law in this state requires consent or contractual agreement to validate a promised inheritance? Lucas shifted. I thought it was implied. It's not, she said. And no amount of emotional expectation changes that. The hearing ended 2 hours later. Judge Singer didn't rule immediately, said she would take a few days to review and issue her decision in writing. But I could already feel it in the air.
The shift.
The turning tide. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. One shouted my name, asking how it felt to stand up for myself in court. I paused on the steps and turned back. It feels, I said, like reclaiming the pages of a book I let other people write for far too long. Robert chuckled beside me. Well said. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the quiet heavy around me. I turned off the TV
Turned off my phone.
and let the silence speak. I wasn't just fighting for a house or a name on a document. I was fighting for the right to matter, to not be erased, to not be rewritten by the people I had once trusted most. And even if the judge ruled against me, even if the whole world turned its back, I would still have this. My voice, my choices.
My peace.
The decision arrived on a Thursday. I found the envelope wedged between my electricity bill and a Bed Bath & Beyond flyer, inconspicuous except for the official seal in the top corner. I brought it inside, set it carefully on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time. I'd braced myself for both outcomes. I knew the law was on my side, but I also knew how sentiment and ambiguity could twist things, especially when family was involved. Still, my hands trembled slightly as I sliced open the envelope. Final judgment: dismissal of all claims against defendant Marion Hartley. Court finds no evidence of verbal contract or inheritance promise. No legal basis for Lucas Hartley's claims to property or assets. Revised will is valid and enforceable. Legal fees to be covered by plaintiff. My breath left me in a rush. I read it twice, then a third time, just to be sure. The lawsuit was over. I'd won. Not in a triumphant, cinematic sort of way. There was no cheering or applause, no confetti or champagne. Just me, sitting at the table where I'd once helped Lucas with his fourth-grade math homework, holding a letter that officially declared me the rightful owner of my own life. And that was enough. I texted Robert a simple message. "It's done. Thank you." He replied immediately. "You were brilliant. We'll celebrate soon." Then I texted Chloe. "Victory lunch?" My treat. Her response: "Yes. Can we make it Italian and emotional?" I smiled. For the first time in a while, the corners of my mouth didn't feel rusty. Later that afternoon, I was making a grocery list when I heard the knock. It wasn't hurried or angry, just two firm taps on the front door. I peered through the peephole and paused. It was Alexis. I hadn't seen her in weeks. She looked different. Tired, certainly, but not the smug, manicured version I'd grown used to. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup. Her belly had rounded significantly. She was well into her third trimester now. I opened the door slowly. "Marion," she said, almost timidly. "Alexis. I was hoping we could talk." I considered telling her to leave, reminding her of the letter, the lies, the manipulation. But something in her face stopped me. She wasn't here to fight. I stepped aside. 5 minutes. She entered like a shadow. Her eyes flicked over the furniture, still mine. The walls, still filled with family photos she once suggested I modernize. She sat on the edge of the couch, back straight, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. "I heard about the ruling," she said. "I'm sure Lucas told you."
He did, she said.
After he stopped yelling, I waited. She glanced down at her belly, then up at me. "I know I'm not your favorite person, and I deserve that. I was awful to you." I raised an eyebrow. Accurate so far. She nodded. "But I need to say some things. Not to defend myself, just to explain." I crossed my arms. "Go ahead." She took a breath. "I didn't come for much. My mom raised me and my brother in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. She worked nights cleaning offices and still couldn't afford the field trips or the decent shoes. I told myself I'd marry into stability, into a life that didn't feel like survival. "So you picked my son." "He had the pedigree," she said, eyes glinting, "but no backbone. I thought I could build the life I wanted through him, through your house, your resources." And when I resisted, she looked ashamed. I panicked. I knew the baby was coming. I was scared of being poor again. And Lucas, well, he folds under pressure. So I pushed. And when I fought back, I got mean, she admitted, because I didn't know what else to do. There was a long silence. She wiped at her eye. I know you don't owe me anything. Not even this conversation. But I wanted to say,
I'm sorry.
for everything. For the email, the lawsuit, the entitlement. All of it. She stood slowly, wincing a little. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just to know that I see it now. What we did. What it cost you. She turned toward the door. I should have let her leave. Should have stayed cold. Firm. Justified. But then she hesitated. One hand on the knob. And I saw her shoulders shake slightly, just once. She wasn't the villain anymore. She was scared. Alone. Pregnant. And still very young, in all the ways that mattered. Alexis, I said quietly.
She paused.
I won't forget what you did. But I also won't punish a baby for their parents' mistakes. She turned, eyes wide. I don't know what that means yet, I said. Not in practice. But if you or the baby need something, diapers, help finding a place to stay, a name for the pediatrician, I'll pick up the phone. She blinked, lips trembling. I thank you. I wasn't expecting. I know, I said gently. She opened the door, stepped into the late afternoon light. And for the first time since this all began, she didn't look like someone trying to win. She looked like someone trying to heal. That night, I took a long bath, lit the same candle I had the night before the hearing, and sat with myself. I hadn't just protected my home. I'd reclaimed my boundaries, my future, my voice. But even more than that, I'd remembered that justice isn't about destroying others. It's about not destroying yourself to keep them comfortable. It was just after 3 a.m. when the call came. I jolted awake to the sound of my phone vibrating violently on the nightstand, its screen flashing. Unknown number. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something in my chest told me to answer. Hello.
My voice was groggy, dry.
A man's voice on the other end. Urgent, professional. Is this Marion Hartley? Yes. This is Dr. Patel at St. Joseph's Medical Center. You're listed as an emergency contact for Alexis Hartley. She's been admitted. Labor has started early. There were complications. I sat straight up. What? She's not due for another 6 weeks. I understand. We're working on stabilizing both her and the baby, but she insisted we call you. She said, you're the only one she trusts right now. I was already moving before he finished his sentence, pulling on jeans, grabbing my keys. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. Alexis needed me. And whether I was ready or not, I was someone's emergency contact again. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and artificial calm. The waiting room was empty, the vending machines humming softly under flickering fluorescent lights. A nurse led me down a hallway to labor and delivery. She's in room 302. Doctor says things are progressing quickly. The baby's in some distress, but they're doing everything they can. She's been asking for you. I pushed open the door and stopped. Alexis lay in the bed, pale and drenched in sweat. Her hair stuck to her face. Wires snaked from her wrist, and a monitor beeped beside her like a metronome for panic. When she saw me, her lips trembled. Marion, I'm here, I said, rushing to her side. She grabbed my hand like a lifeline. I was so scared, she whispered, her voice raw. Lucas isn't here. He said he had a work presentation. He said I was being dramatic. I didn't answer that. I just squeezed her hand tighter. You're not alone, I said. Not tonight. Not anymore. A contraction racked her body, and she cried out, squeezing my hand until I thought my fingers would break. I didn't pull away. I stayed. For hours later, the baby was born. A little boy. He didn't cry at first. That silence was the loudest moment of my life. Then, finally, a thin, wavering wail. Weak but alive. I wept. Not just for him, but for everything that had led us to this. They placed him in the NICU immediately, incubated and monitored. Alexis was barely conscious, her body exhausted and trembling, but she looked at me with tear-filled eyes. Can you go see him? She rasped. Please. I'm too scared. So I went. The NICU was dim and quiet, a strange blend of clinical and sacred. Rows of incubators, tiny life machines blinking in soft rhythm. A nurse pointed me to the second pod. And there he was. So small. So impossibly small. His chest rose and fell like a flickering candle. I placed a hand gently on the glass and whispered, "Welcome, little one. You made it." I stared at him for a long time. He had Lucas's ears, Alexis's chin, and a world of complication waiting just outside those plastic walls. But he was here, and somehow he felt like hope. When I returned to Alexis's room, she was drifting in and out of sleep. I pulled a chair close, sat beside her, and rested my hand on her arm. She stirred. "Did you see him?" "I did." "Is he okay?" "He's fighting. And he's beautiful." A tear slid down her cheek. "I don't know how to be a good mother." My heart ached at how young she sounded. "None of us do," I said. "We just figure it out one day at a time." She nodded weakly, then whispered, "I named him Samuel." "Samuel," I repeated. "That's a strong name." "It was my grandfather's. He was the only man who ever made my mom feel safe." I swallowed the lump in my throat. For a moment, we weren't enemies. We weren't adversaries in a legal war. We were just two women bound by a newborn heartbeat. Lucas didn't show up until almost noon. He walked into the hospital with a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, muttering about missed calls and deadlines. When he saw me, his face paled. "What are you doing here?" "Being where I was asked to be," I said calmly. He looked past me to Alexis, asleep and pale. "You left her alone?" I asked. "She told me not to come until she was admitted." "She told me she begged you." He looked away. For the first time, I didn't see defiance in his expression. I saw shame. "They said the baby might have lung issues," he said quietly.
"He's strong," I said.
"He's going to be okay." Lucas nodded, then sat in the corner, hands in his lap. The room filled with silence. Not tension, just space. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. He was lost, too. Entitled, yes. Arrogant. But not evil. Just someone who had never learned to value people over comfort. Who had been handed too much and taught too little about earning it. And now he was a father. He'd have to learn fast. Later that evening, I returned home to a new voicemail. It was from the hospital's social worker. She explained that Alexis had listed me as the emergency guardian for Samuel in the event of anything unexpected. That if things took a turn, I might be called on to make decisions. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in hand, and whispered aloud, "Oh, Alexis." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my porch beneath a blanket, watching the moon rise through the trees. Somewhere in the world, a baby named Samuel was learning how to breathe. Somewhere inside me, a heart I thought had closed forever was creaking open. Not for Lucas. Not even for Alexis. But for this child. This second chance. This reminder that legacies aren't built with bank accounts or legal victories. They're built in moments of mercy. 3 weeks after Samuel was born, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email. Not a phone call. A real letter. On thick, cream-colored stationery with a gold embossed logo that read, Midstate Family Trust Advisory Board. It looked official. Too official. I opened it slowly, cautious after everything that had come before. The letter began politely, professionally. Then it veered into something I hadn't anticipated. "Dear Mrs. Hartley, following the media attention your foundation has garnered and your recent court ruling, we'd like to formally invite you to serve on the Mid-State Advisory Panel for Intergenerational Equity. Your voice and story reflect the experiences of countless women whose contributions have long gone unacknowledged within both family and legal systems. We believe your insight could shape meaningful reform. A stipend, office accommodations, and travel expenses would be provided. Please let us know if you're willing to discuss this further. Warm regards, Janelle Whitaker, Program Director." I read the letter 3 times. Then I set it down and laughed. A short, surprised sound that startled even me. 3 months ago, I was being quietly shoved out of my own garage. Now I was being asked to advise a board on family law. It felt surreal, but also deserved. I'd earned this, not just by surviving, but by refusing to disappear. I called Janelle that afternoon. She was sharp, kind, and respectful of my hesitation. "Take your time," she said. "We just want to make sure women like you aren't left out of the conversation anymore." That night, I drove to the hospital. Samuel had been discharged from the NICU 2 days earlier, and Alexis was recovering in a transitional maternity room. Lucas was supposed to pick them both up that morning. But when I called to check in, Alexis admitted softly he said he had to wrap up some things at work. So I drove down myself. I knocked once before opening the door to find Alexis sitting on the edge of the bed, rocking gently with Samuel in her arms. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. But her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Marion," she said, relief bleeding through the exhaustion. "Thank God." "No ride yet?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "He keeps saying he's coming, but he hasn't shown." I looked at Samuel.
Pink-cheeked now.
A faint dimple beginning to form. Stronger than he had any right to be. "I brought the car seat," I said. "Let's go home." We didn't talk much on the ride. Samuel slept. Alexis stared out the window. When we pulled into my driveway, she hesitated. "I don't want to impose," she said. "I know this was never the plan." "Plans change," I replied. "Especially when the people making them disappear at the first sign of responsibility." She didn't argue. I carried the bags inside while she settled Samuel into the bassinet I had set up in the guest room the night before. I hadn't told her I'd been preparing. I hadn't told myself either. But somewhere deep down, I knew this moment might come. Over dinner, simple soup and buttered toast, Alexis finally spoke. "Lucas hasn't touched Samuel," she said quietly. "Not once. He hasn't even held him." My hand froze over my spoon. "I don't know what to do," she continued. "He's charming in front of people, but at home he's absent. Or worse, cold. Like the baby is a burden that derailed his life." I said nothing. She looked up at me, her face raw. "I don't want that for Samuel. I don't want him to grow up thinking love is conditional." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Then don't let him." Later that night, as I washed dishes and hummed to myself in the kitchen, there was a knock at the door. Lucas. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Hair messy, tie askew, eyes ringed with red. He didn't wait for an invitation before stepping inside. "Where are they?" he asked. "Sleeping," I said, drying my hands calmly. He looked around, jaw clenched. "So what now? You're just going to replace me?" "I'm not replacing anyone," I said. "I'm stepping in where someone else stepped out." He flinched. "I didn't abandon them." "You didn't show up," I replied. "To the delivery. To the discharge. To your son." His shoulders tensed, but he didn't deny it. "I didn't ask for this," he muttered. "None of it." "That child didn't ask for you either," I said. "But he's here. And he deserves more than excuses." He sat heavily at the table. "I'm not like you." "No," I said. "You're not." He looked at me, finally, eyes full of guilt, and something else, fear. "Is it too late?" I studied him. My son. My grown, floundering son who had once ridden on my hip and cried when I kissed his scraped knees. "It's never too late to try," I said. "But you have to show up."
Consistently.
Quietly. Without applause. He nodded.
Slowly.
"I'll come tomorrow." I gave him a long look. "We'll see." That night, I sat by Samuel's bassinet. He was swaddled tight, face relaxed in peaceful sleep. I brushed a finger gently along his tiny knuckles. "You're not going to grow up wondering if you matter," I whispered. "Not on my watch." He stirred but didn't wake. In the other room, Alexis finally slept. And in my inbox, Janelle's follow-up email waited patiently. Subject: board position. We'd be honored. I clicked reply.
Count me in.
Spring came early that year. The dogwood trees in the neighborhood bloomed 2 weeks ahead of schedule, painting the sidewalks with soft pink petals like someone had spilled romance onto the concrete. Every morning, I opened the curtains to sunlight pouring through the windows, filtering past the lace panels I refused to replace. The house had never felt more alive. And yet, I was preparing to leave it. Not because anyone was pushing me out, but because for the first time in decades, I was leaving on my own terms. The call had come the week before. Janelle from the advisory board. Marian, she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. The foundation wants to fund a full-time director role. We want you to come to Hartford. Oversee program design. Mentor younger advocates. Help shape a statewide initiative. I was stunned. Full-time. Full-time. With housing, a salary,
Autonomy.
and more influence than you'll find anywhere else. But we'd understand if. No, I interrupted, already smiling. You had me at autonomy. The following week was a whirlwind. I called Robert first. You're leaving? He asked, his voice unreadable. Not permanently, I said. Just shifting chapters. He was quiet a moment. Then, I'll miss our Friday coffees. We'll Zoom. I'm a modern woman now, remember?
He laughed.
You always were. You just forgot for a little while. Next, I told Alexis. We sat on the back porch while Samuel gurgled in his bassinet, staring up at the fluttering leaves above him. Her reaction surprised me. She didn't look panicked or abandoned. She looked proud. You're doing it, she said softly. You're really doing it. I am. She nodded. You deserve to live your life, not just survive it. I could say the same to you. She looked at Samuel, then back at me. I'm going to stay, she said. Not in your house, don't worry. I found a 2-bedroom near the library. Affordable.
Safe.
Close enough that you can visit when you miss him too much. I smiled. That's going to be often.
I hope so, she said.
Because I still have so much to learn. About parenting. About being a decent human. You're already on your way. She reached for my hand, her eyes misting over. I know I don't deserve your help. Or your kindness. But I'll never stop being grateful for it. I squeezed her fingers. Don't be grateful, I said. Be better. She nodded. Lucas came by the night before my flight. I hadn't invited him, but I wasn't surprised to see him standing on the front steps, holding a small box wrapped in blue paper. I heard you're moving, he said. Temporarily. To start a new life. To continue this one. He handed me the box. I unwrapped it carefully to find an old photograph, faded at the edges, but still vibrant. It was me, holding toddler Lucas in one arm, the other gripping a wrench as I leaned over the hood of our old Buick. Grease on my cheek, a fire in my eyes. I found it in the garage, he said. I thought you'd want it. I studied the photo for a long moment. I remember this day, I said. The radiator blew, and I had exactly $40 to fix it or buy groceries.
You fixed it, he said.
Then made grilled cheese for dinner. And told you it was a special treat. He laughed quietly, then sobered. I'm sorry, Mom. For everything. For not seeing you. For trying to take what wasn't mine. For letting Alexis twist things. I looked at him. Really looked. The boy who used to cry when I left for work. The teenager who stopped hugging me in public. The man who forgot I was a person. I forgive you, I said. But that doesn't mean I forget. I know. It means I'm choosing peace. Not for you. For me. I'll earn it back, he said. I swear I will. We'll see, I replied. Start with Samuel. Start by showing up. He nodded. Can I call you? Sometimes? Ask for advice. I'd like that, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The morning I left, Carol came to help me load the last suitcase into the car. You're going to change the world, she said, adjusting my scarf like I was her own daughter. I'm just trying to change mine. She kissed my cheek. You already have. I stood on the porch one last time. Not with sadness, but with reverence. This house had been my battlefield, my sanctuary, my prison, and my rebirth. It had seen me at my worst and carried me toward my best. And now I was leaving it, not because I'd lost it, but because I'd outgrown it. I turned the key in the lock, placed it in the envelope I'd labeled for Alexis, and slid it into the mailbox. Then I got in the car and drove away. As the town disappeared in my rearview mirror, I thought about all the women watching my story unfold online, reading the headlines, writing me letters. I thought about the ones who never got to rewrite their endings, who gave and gave until there was nothing left. And I thought about Samuel, sleeping in a new crib in a modest apartment with a mother who was trying. A child who would grow up knowing that love wasn't measured by what someone gave you, but by what they refused to let be taken away. I had once been afraid of losing everything. And in the end, I found something more: myself. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts.